Welcome to the AIX Podcast. This is a series of podcasts that build on each other to help business leaders think about implementing AI transformation. Today, we'd like to provide our audience with two tangible takeaways. First, to provide examples of enterprise AIX and how to have continuous advantage in the marketplace. And second, macro requirements for enterprise AIX success. Our next guest represents a remarkable journey in technology transformation, from his early days as an engineering leader to now heading one of the most innovative tech companies in the space. His path reflects the rapid evolution of enterprise technology itself. Vinod Muthuswamy currently serves as CEO of Resolve Tech Solutions, or RTS, a 2024 AI Excellence Award winner, top 25 AI company, and valued partner of Paragon. Under his leadership, RTS has become a powerhouse, delivering cutting-edge IT services and digital transformation solutions across cloud, AI/ML, cybersecurity, and ERP modernization. His expertise mirrors the current critical technologies shaping today's business landscape, from cloud operations to digital transformation, industrial Internet of Things. RTS has also been recognized with SAP's NS2 2023 Outstanding Partner Award. It partners with numerous Fortune 500 organizations across energy, telecom, retail, government, aerospace, and defense sectors. Let's take a quick look at some of the stops on Vinod's professional journey. He's run customer service organizations. He's been a VP of managed services, scaling cloud solutions and IT services, growing businesses by over 35% annually. As the chief technology officer, he's pioneered industrial IoT and blockchain platforms, and currently serves as RTS's CEO, delivering solutions across all major cloud platforms. In terms of growth, he's grown managed services businesses by over 400% over 3 years, improved the bottom line profitability by over 300%, expanded service offerings into AI/ML, cloud, and digital transformation, and he's managed P&L responsibilities exceeding $700 million. Proud to call him a professional, colleague, and a friend. Vinod, welcome to the AIX Podcast.
Ariel, thank you very much. That was a fantastic introduction. I wouldn't have done justice to that introduction, so thank you very much for that. I'm super excited to be here on this podcast.
We're pleased to have you, and we value our partnership with RTS and the entire team. So, riffing on the bio, which is formidable, you have come up from the engineering side of the organization, crossing over to the business side in your incredible career. Is there a superpower that helped you with that transition? And if so, how did you develop it?
That's a fantastic question, Ariel. Coming from the engineering side of the business, obviously that allowed me to get a lot more in-depth in terms of the workings of the technology and how it could potentially deliver value to the customer. But one superpower that I would always rely on that really enabled me to transition into the business is really listening to the customer. And every aspect of the journey where I've introduced services, I've launched new business lines, it has been always talking to customers about what their pain points are. How do we really address those pain points? And do we have a foundational, infrastructure and capability that could, shoot off into an adjacency to deliver that value to the customer, develop the plan. And that's how I see. So that hasn't changed over the 2.5 decades of being in this industry. And today, the way you put it in terms of my journey of evolving from, customer service technology, supporting large-scale technology infrastructure and building service lines to deliver value to customers, to now transforming large enterprises through RTS, leveraging some of the core platform transformations, but also introducing emerging technologies such as AI into the mix. Is only possible because of that continuous communication with the customer and listening to where they are in terms of their journey.
Absolutely. And it seems to be paying off. RTS won SAP's NS2 Outstanding Partner Award. And the question here is, how are you seeing enterprises integrate AI into their SAP environments?
SAP started off early in the past 5 years, I would say, really working with large enterprises in terms of pushing them and pushing the boundary of where they are in their technology journey and driving the migration of those customers from the legacy platforms ECC to S/4HANA. That's one of the foundations of RTS's business today. We are accelerating the process of that journey, of that transformation and modernization journey, for large and mid-sized enterprises who have current ECC infrastructure and have to migrate to S/4HANA. The migration journey is now coupled with the introduction of business AI into the mix. And these are two elements that are going in parallel at this point when you look at SAP's journey. SAP obviously has introduced a framework of Joule as their core AI framework, and how they foresee AI being embedded as every aspect of their underlying technology, delivering value to the business across the board. There's the couple of things that I would sort of give you as takeaways. The technical debt still has to be met in terms of overcome for these enterprises. So there's no stepping away from not wanting to migrate from ECC to S/4HANA. It's no longer about, hey, can I still just continue with my current infrastructure and then leverage AI, right? So they have to go down that journey. The second aspect is introducing AI, as we have talked about in the past. It's one thing that it's on the radar of every CIO, but it's also being pushed by the business, because it's really more than a CIO's agenda. It's a CEO's charter to enable them to differentiate themselves in the market, innovate across all their competitors, because if they don't take that step today, their competitors are going to outrun them. Right. So SAP has come up with their approach towards how they want to introduce AI. It's an early stage introduction. Whenever SAP introduces something at an early stage, I would expect at least a year or two for it to sort of really mature itself in terms of how they're going to introduce AI into every aspect of their entire application footprint. But what SAP has done really unique is they're also enabling enterprises to integrate platforms that are already down that path, such as OpenAI, Google Cloud, whether it's Meta's Llama, into their business processes through BTP, which is their flagship integration platform that allows enterprises to integrate any customization that they historically had done across the SAP platform. And the next aspect is, with their investment in Signavio, they're also engaging customers to look at their current business processes and help them make a decision on, hey, how do you optimize that business process with AI, or potentially eliminate some business process? So they clearly are taking business AI very seriously, and we feel extremely excited and sort of leading the way with the way RTS is organized, in its lines of business, not only enabling customers to modernize their ERP platform, but we've done significant work even from an AI/ML perspective, leveraging generative AI and traditional machine learning as well. So we feel very confident of, talking to customers about not just fulfilling the technical debt, but also how do we introduce AI into their business process today. And as we've worked with Paragon in the past, going through that conversation early on, having that discussion about, the strategy and their current business where they are, fits very well with our overall go-to-market.
So I wanted to unpack a couple of things. One that you mentioned that's on the people side first. We have a lot of empathy for the CIO organization, having come up from that space in our careers. And with that lens, technology roadmaps keep getting more complex. A lot of times, the CIO organization is still reeling from the last buzzword, right? And you mentioned technical debt. In the SAP world, for example, companies are still migrating to SAP S/4HANA Cloud, and here comes AI. Right? So as a former engineering leader with empathy for the CIO org, how should CIOs prioritize technical debt versus AI transformation? And how much of this does IT actually own?
Most of the CIOs today, when you really look at, their prioritization, a lot of it is dependent upon how the CEO and the rest of the board are defining these priorities, right? The technical debt has already been on their roadmap, and they're working towards, overcoming that technical debt, through leveraging. If it's a large enterprise, they're working with, consulting firms to sort of develop the strategy and design that strategy, work with the business to really make sure that the value that they're going to get, by transitioning from ECC to S4 is maximized and realized. But on the other end, when they start looking at AI, majority of the priorities are coming from the board of directors, the CEOs, and the business line leaders, right? So CIOs now, are even more. I think a decade ago we were saying that the CIO's role is changing, or maybe a decade and a half ago we were saying the role of the CIO is changing, because you're no longer just looking at CIOs as strong technical leaders that just understand the underlying technology framework. People who have grown up in the infrastructure space, who eventually have adopted, applications, transition into a CIO role because they kind of understand the macro level technology infrastructure. Today, the CIO has to understand, every aspect of the business, has to understand what are the competitions doing, how is the company positioned in the marketplace to compete, and what are the key growth drivers for the business, and how are you enabling those growth drivers, and how are you enabling the company to sort of really capitalize on those growth drivers with the investments that are going to be making the technology infrastructure, right? And those are the CIOs that typically tend to make bold moves, go through, 5-year transformation projects where they're potentially changing complete look in facelifting the entire infrastructure, transforming their application footprint, looking at how they interact with employees, customers, and partners. Those are the key roles that you see today in how the CIO's role is evolving. And AI plays a big aspect of those priorities, and how they leverage AI to transform the business is going to be key. So most CEOs set up a vision of a 3 or 5-year vision, which is then aligned with the CIO's goals, that then they have to develop detailed execution plans of whether it's transforming customer service, whether it's transforming field service, warehouse management, sales and distribution. Every aspect of the business is now up for grabs from a process transformation perspective, leveraging AI.
And, in terms of the ownership, one of the things that we're seeing is that there's a change in the role of the CFO. And it kind of makes sense. It's kind of gone from looking in the rearview mirror to helping drive things, forming an alliance with the CIO organization and the IT organization, because, they understand the numbers and they can measure things. And another thing that we're seeing is, rather than relying on several year-long roadmaps, there's the opportunity now to test it quickly, get some data, and close the feedback loop. Are you seeing, that in your client relationships, where the alliance between the finance organization and the IT organization is really pivotal to both driving capital efficiency as well as setting the foundation for a center for data excellence?
No, you bring up a very good point, Ariel. When you think about the role of the CFO, as we talked about the role of the CIO, the role of the CFO is also shifting away from just traditional finance operations and delivering, financial analytics back to the business. You tend to see more CFOs leaning towards becoming more COOs as well, right? So they're playing this, they're slowly, evolving themselves towards that COO role. And that's when they get into that COO role, that's where the business process transformation becomes, quintessential. In one of the large organizations that we support, the CFO actually switched his role from a CFO to a COO. And the COO, in his new role as a COO, is responsible for the entire enterprise transformation. So the conversation that we are having right now, so he's responsible to ensure that the technical debt is overcome, So they're migrating from ECC to S/4HANA. At the same time, he's in conversations about how do you introduce AI into their customer service organization? How do you introduce AI into their accounting process? Even though that accounting function reports to the CFO, the COO is taking the lead. So in certain organization of a certain size, that CFO and COO role are collapsed. In certain organizations, they are split. But CFOs are more and more becoming COOs. And in that sense, they will be a key stakeholder that's going to be responsible with this transformation. And that CIO and CFO tag team, sort of Batman and Robin combination is starting to play out well, right?
Absolutely.
And they can truly execute, this broad strategy that the CEO lays out. Because if you really think about it, the key sort of executives that drive the business function transformations are your CFO, your CIO, and your COO, and all other functions sort of just flow into those transformation.
And it's almost like nowadays you feel the data debt before you feel the technical debt. Technical debt was always this abstract thing that existed on the CIO's roadmap, but in the CFO's world or the COO, sometimes there's a missing COO role, which is kind of like a canary in the coal mine. But that data debt hits harder than the technical debt, and that's definitely something that we're seeing as well. On the topic of ERP solutions, so this might be a little bit of a controversial question, but ERP vendors traditionally position themselves as the one-stop shop for every solution an enterprise needs. How do you help enterprises navigate between native ERP capabilities and best-of-breed solutions for their jobs to be done with respect to AI transformation?
You're absolutely right. Most ERP solutions, either natively have a platform that they're trying to address majority of the business requirements for an enterprise, or over a period of time, they've done enough acquisitions that that they tend to integrate as part of their overall ecosystem to deliver an end-to-end solution to the enterprise. When we look at customers, we first take a very independent approach towards how we look at the business and what are the requirements of the business. A lot of times we end up going in with, if SAP is the core platform, it's not necessary that we recommend, every aspect of SAP, to those customers. In most cases, we do see that SAP may fulfill, let's say, 80 to 90% of their requirements. But there are a lot of situations where there are unique capabilities that customers are looking for. And when you look at the evolution of certain platforms where SAP may not have invested enough and have achieved enough of a depth in capability that allows them to be ahead of some of the competitors, then we take a look at those competitors and bring those competitors to bear in terms of integrating them back into their core SAP ERP system, right? So, for example, in retail, there are customers that we support today that not only have SAP as their core ERP platform, but use sort of Blue Yonder or other platforms that are sort of best of breed solutions. When it comes to enterprise content management, OpenText is a great solution that, continuously we see it as part of this overall enterprise data management footprint across SAP. So even in our cloud infrastructure today, close to 80% of the infrastructure that's being managed is all core SAP, and the remainder 20% is non-SAP applications, which are talking back to the core SAP application. So best of breed is more acceptable both by the customers today and by SAP and some of these large ERP platforms, where they not only are providing the ability to leverage these tool sets as well as capabilities, but they also integrate fairly well with these. And now what you're doing is, as you look at enterprise data platforms and as you look at integrating those enterprise data platforms, you can now bring data from SAP and these third-party applications back into enterprise, data lake or data lake house, which can eventually transform into how data is being fed through pipelines into machine learning models that
Right.
could consume it much better. So I do believe that will continue to happen. When you look at SAP as a core application, as well as other applications that would integrate back into SAP.
Perfect. And one of the concepts is that if there's an existing silo of data that has strong enterprise adoption, even if it's not within the core stack. So, the customer service organization, we're seeing a lot of ServiceNow adoption. So that tends to be fertile ground for harvesting, ticket data and and support related functions as well.
Field service, for that matter, right?
Yep.
ServiceNow has become a formidable, sort of adjacent player to SAP, where ServiceNow goes in and they go in and they market to enterprises about everything. They can do everything outside of the core ERP, and to some extent are also sort of entering into that ERP space to some extent. So, and they've been very successful doing that. And one of the things, Ariel, we think about when we think about applications that and services that, whether it's a software application or a SaaS platform that enterprises are using, and we use a combination of best of breed platforms, and we start thinking about you talked about data silos, right? So one of the approaches that we recommend to customers is data marketplace, where in large enterprises, just bringing a massive data platform across the board to be able to have uniformity and ubiquity across all the data elements across your enterprise is going to be significantly challenging. And it's a long tail. So in order to enable those enterprises to accelerate the process of how they can consume data from whether it's customer service, field service, whether it is finance, we are in conversations with a lot of enterprises around building data marketplaces that eventually, as each line of business, sort of publishes their data into the data marketplace, you can then leverage that data to then design and train models that can be applicable across the entire enterprise. So when you're thinking of an end-to-end process, that makes it much more easier.
This sort of transitions well into the conversation about governance. And, you've helped transform many Fortune 500 companies. What is a good framework for enterprise-wide AI adoption? And specifically, what does successful AI governance look like at enterprise scale?
It's a fantastic question. And it's also, one of the issues or top of mind issues for CIOs, your chief data officers that are really responsible for governance of that data. What I will start is when you look at any enterprise today, most enterprises have a data governance framework that is very much tied to how they manage data within the the platforms and within the functions tied to the enterprise business itself, right? That's predominantly limited to what I call as legacy transformation. They're looking at transactional data, they're looking at data sovereignty, they're looking at data privacy and data residency in terms of, where is the data consumed and where does it reside, right? That now needs to shift into a broader view where not only do you have to just look at data from a governance framework perspective, you also need to look at, sort of the security and privacy associated with that data. And when you start looking at federal customers or customers that have a significant compliance requirement, most of these federal customers are going to struggle with publishing this data to be consumed by a generative AI model that is, being delivered as a service in the cloud. That's probably going to take a much longer time in terms of until the platforms can truly prove back to these agencies and customers that, when they talk about FedRAMP certified and data sovereignty, that the models are actually residing. That could be, the models potentially could be killed by the enterprise if need be, once it's trained, right? So you'll tend to see more of open source based models that could be controlled and handled, in a retrieval augmented, framework where it's that model is never published to the public. You're using your data to train the model, even though the model has built its foundation based on data that was publicly available. You will build those models tied to the data that's within your enterprise. And most of the projects that we work on are tied to our own RAG framework associated with open source model. And there's a combination of heavyweight models that we leverage. There's a combination of lightweight models depending on the use case that we leverage, and we keep it sort of containerized within within the boundary of the enterprise.
Yeah.
So that becomes a big aspect. The other aspect is also when enterprises are looking at their policies, like what is their policies of how data is being consumed, how developers are using tool sets today to generate code. Ensuring that your legal and compliance policies are also aligned from a governance perspective, that across the enterprise and across your teams, where they are leveraging tools, they do understand the risk associated with, just openly opening up a ChatGPT screen, pasting your requirements for code, and then generating the code through that, and then cutting and pasting that back into your environment and testing that. You're opening yourself up to a lot of risk when it comes to IP threat and others, right? Because every data that you use to generate is constantly going back to the model to self-train it. So defining those policies, leveraging the legal teams to ensure that, one, it's drafted correctly, and your governance and risk teams are looking at that, and then also rolling it out across the enterprise and understanding who is going to be interacting with this type of data, and who potentially could be generating this risk, and communicating them, going through the training process and establishing a compliance program that can actually communicate that is more important. At this point, people don't know what they don't know, right, in terms of the risk. And that's, those are some of the key elements that we continuously talk to our customers about when it comes to both, how data should be managed and what are the key governance and risk components you should consider when you're using AI.
We almost say on the Paragon side that we have entered a new era in software development and management and deployment. It's actually post-SaaS. And for lack of a better term, we're calling it data products. And you nailed it. Basically, it's your cloud, it's your data, for the sake of security, for the sake of efficiency. It doesn't make sense to schlep your data over an API or some latent interface, especially if it's your product. And something that delights the CFOs, because you're building your own data products, you can have perhaps some R&D credits, perhaps some depreciation on software because it's all your solution. It's kind of like coming back full circle. And so we're definitely seeing teams take this approach, CIOs. And, Paragon recently launched its Managed Intelligence Provider, or MIP, service as a flexible team that you can use as sort of a can of turbo boost to launch that effort. Instead of hiring up your own resources. So there are definitely ways to achieve that. And I'm glad that you mentioned some of these highly regulated industries, because those are some of the most best examples of fertile ground for these data products. Wanted to talk a little bit now about uniqueness of SAP in the SAP universe. So at some level, most ERPs, the major ones, are kind of similar. Functionally, they do similar things. Are there specific considerations, given your expertise, when planning an AIX strategy for an SAP customer?
Most ERP platforms, provide, when you look at the foundational capabilities, they cover 80% of feature sets. One may look green, the other may look blue. Those are sort of the differences. When you look at large-scale ERPs, there are two major platforms that really come to play, which is SAP and Oracle. When you look at global consolidation and things like that, and when you look at human capital management, Workday is a great player in that space. SAP has done a phenomenal job when it comes to specific verticals, when it comes to federal, aerospace and defense, manufacturing, utilities, retail, as well as oil and gas, transportation, logistics. Some of these vertical segments, SAP is a market leader. Some of them they have 80% market share globally, and some of them they have 60 north of 60% in market share. So what has happened over the years with SAP, the beauty of SAP is that SAP you could transform the entire platform from scratch and build out your own unique ERP platform, leveraging SAP, and it will look nowhere close to what SAP originally had. That's the level of customization that SAP allowed in the past, right? And because of that customization, there's quite a bit of what we call as this customization debt that is sitting in the enterprise compared to the SAP environment. And as they're trying to overcome this technical debt, you continuously get to the point where you start looking at the amount of customizations that are done. You cannot move those customizations into the core ERP anymore, because the core ERP is going to be controlled by SAP, where they're going to upgrade it on a continuous basis as part of their RISE framework and their RISE contracts. So enterprises now have to think, what is the impact of either eliminating that customization, or how would that customization fit into this new world of S/4HANA? When we start thinking of that, there is an opportunity, as we've discussed in the past, Ariel, not every business process needs to be replicated. Not every business process needs to be automated. There is potentially a need to eliminate some business processes, right? So that simplification process allows us to, one, look at, can we introduce AI potentially to automate a business process that could not be eliminated, or can we rethink the way this entire end-to-end business process is running and introduce potentially AI or other platforms that could integrate back into the SAP ecosystem, right? So that is one way that we're leveraging. And every time there's a technology shift, like you're migrating a customer from, and this is a significant, it's almost like a seismic shift, where not only are you just upgrading the software, but you're shifting that infrastructure from on-premise to cloud, because on-premise, SAP is not going to support your future S/4HANA versions. Gives us a greater opportunity to have the conversation of leveraging AI across their business processes, tied to SAP and non-SAP applications as well. Because once they're in the cloud, it gives you a much more better opportunity to really bring in all those services in a seamless fashion and showcase POCs and proof of concepts and proof of value